right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Bishop's Corner. My name is Philip Reed, and I am the producer for the program. Tonight, we're doing something a little bit different because we have these great and amazing guest panelists on our program tonight. And we're talking about being a man, basing it on the song To Be a Man from Dax. And so we're going to be featuring that tonight. But we have a few gentlemen on here that have some great men's programs that we want to feature for you. So I'm just going to introduce them now. First, I'm going to start with Lowe's Moore. Lowe's, please join us and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, the chair of the King Movement Westchester chapter and part of a national chapter with the president and founder being Chris Broussard, who's a part of the Fox Sports One network, analyst for the NBA as well. And back about 7 years ago, he started this King Movement around men, which means, you know, uh, we meet monthly in terms of Westchester, trying to get men to number one, fellowship. Number two, have an impact in their families, in their churches, and also in their communities as well. So for more information, man, you can reach out to me at lowesmore.com or lowesmore at 914-774-6659.
Thank you so much, Lowe's. Want everyone to please do your best and reach out to him to get more information on that. If you are in the Westchester area, this is especially for you. So make sure you reach out to him. Next, we're going to talk to Mr. Drew Delaney. He's going to tell us a little bit about his program on what he does.
Absolutely. So imagine having crystal clear knowledge of your purpose in life, where you make confident decisions and you're productive, assertive, and at peak mental health. I have a men's group that I host where I do support and guide men to tap into their natural power of through self-discovery, so they can write their own story and live the life that they want to live. The platform for my Mindful Man men's group is a safe space for men to be honest, be vulnerable, without judgment, without assumption, and without shame, and without unsolicited advice. It's a very safe space. It's all virtual. And if you are interested, you can reach me at drew@profitcompassion.com. My mission is really to reduce the divorce rate in this country, the male suicide rate, and mitigate family financial loss by enhancing our communication and our relationships. Thanks for the platform there, Phil.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rainey, for sharing that. And last but not least, we have our own Apostle Lucian Rojas. He's having an amazing, amazing event in June. We're going to give him a second to talk about that. Go ahead, Apostle.
Yeah, in June 1st, we'll be having an empowerment breakfast, and it will be taking place at the church. It starts at 9 a.m. in the morning. It will be a sumptuous meal. The tickets are only $25. We're taking a holistic approach. You know, Jesus says, teaching all things when he was leaving. He said, teach them to observe all things. And I believe one of the most balanced chapters in the Bible is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, a time and a purpose for everything under the sun. And I feel somehow we lack in the area when it comes to financial literacy. People are struggling so much. And it is said that 22% of Americans don't have a savings account, 44% doesn't have $1,000 emergency fund. So we want to highlight investing. And when we invest, we expect a ROI, a return on our investment. It will be a breakfast with a difference. So seats are limited, and you would like to join us, feel free.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Apostle. Really appreciate you investing in the community in such a mighty and powerful way. All right, so we're going to play the video now that we're going to be discussing so that our audience can kind of understand where we're coming from as far as our discussion tonight. So stay tuned.
I can't hide myself. I don't expect you to understand. I just hope I can explain what it's like to be a man. It's a lonely road, and they don't care about what you know. It's not about how you feel, but what you provide inside that home.
Being a man is what you make it. You can't always live up to expectations. You try to please everybody while you struggle, so you fake it and end up out of balance, compromising situations. As a good man, do what he should, man. Give everything he has and do everything he could, man. You might find yourself feeling all alone inside a house you built that you don't recognize as home. And that's what my daddy told me, and I'll tell my son the same. Now that I'm older, I relate and I actually feel his pain. He never cried, he might have lied, but he did not complain. And he said, son, one day you'll have to do the same. I get emotional when I stop and think and I look around beyond the county lines of my small town. I think about all the men out there who feel like I do now, who are screaming on the inside but won't ever make
I
a
can't
sound.
hide myself. I don't expect you to understand. I just hope I can explain what it's like to be a man. It's a lonely road, and they don't care about what you know. It's not about how you feel, but what you provide inside that home. Don't give up, keep fighting. As a man, our sun is our horizon, and our father's actions play a role, and we end up like them. So they can't let us see them hurt, cause we'll embody what they do and start a generational curse. No wonder most men are so depressed, all the things that they can't express. They go to war, get thrown on the shelf, then go back to war with their mental health. Then grab that bottle and ask for help, try to pull themselves out of hell, then fall back down and then realize that they're gonna have to do it themselves. It's the circle of life. As a man you provide, they don't know what you're worth till the day that you die, and that's when they start crying. Then move on to a man to confide in. That's why we feel we can't hide ourselves. We can't hide ourselves. We don't expect you to understand. We just hope we can explain what it's like to be a man. It's a lonely road, and you don't care about what we know. It's not about how we feel, but what we provide inside that home. Inside that home. That home. It's not about how we feel, but what we provide inside that home. Inside that home.
So that was Dax, To Be a Man. Now we're going to start our discussion and introduce our infamous, most wonderful host, Mr. Bishop Herbert and Scott. Bishop Scott, come on.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Phil. Certainly, it's a pleasure once again to be on the Bishop's Corner. And thank you very, very much for that wonderful introduction, young man. We want to thank God tonight for the panel that we have tonight. We are so honored to have our Lowe's Moore that's back with us. Can we make him feel welcome? Certainly, Lowe's, it's a pleasure once again to have you, sir, on the Bishop's Corner. Next, we want to thank the good Lord for the apostle that's with us tonight, Apostle Lucien Roas. Man of God, thank you very, very much for weighing in again on the Bishop's Corner. Next, we want to thank the Lord for our Drew Dorani that is with us on the Bishop's Corner. And certainly, Drew, it's always a pleasure to see you. And next, we want to thank the good Lord for Rashawn Trowers that is back with us. Can we make him feel welcome? Now, we do thank God for the men, and I do see a lot of handsome, handsome gentlemen that's with us. But tonight, we do thank the Lord that we have a beautiful young lady, and that's why I left her until last. Tatiana Rennie. Miss Rennie, certainly it's a pleasure to have you on the Bishop's Corner. And young lady, you make us all look so good tonight because of your presence. Thank you for weighing in. Okay, well, tonight we have another great program that's awaiting for us. And we are dealing tonight with emotional resilience and manhood. Emotional resilience and manhood. And let me begin with question number one. And that is, how does DAX employ vulnerability and emotional resilience in to be a man? Let's put that question, first of all, to Rashawn. My friend, how say you?
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me on, and thank you everyone for allowing me to be graced with your presence. With the emotional vulnerability, I mean, he's opening up, explaining his innermost feelings of just what he feels it is to be a man. Just he says we can't hide ourselves, and I wouldn't expect you to understand. And just example after example after example, he's just showing that as a man, it's really tough to open up to your loved ones. And if we would open up to you and tell you all these things, you would look at us and wonder, like, how do you even go forward with all these feelings going on inside of you? So that's one of the main things that I saw and that I get from the song when I think about the emotional vulnerability of DAX. Thank you.
Let me ask you a question, Rashawn. Why do you think men have this inability, this difficulty in opening up?
Because as a child, when we would fall, up until we were around 4 or 5 years old, it was okay to cry, it was okay to open up and express your feelings, but after that, it was suck it up. You'll be all right. Rub some dirt on it, things like that. And so we just grew up with that as men. And even now, it's really, really tough for a lot of men to express their feelings and to open up even to the people that they love the most, their children, their wives. Like the only time men cry is when their favorite sports team wins the championship. Or the birth of a child, and even then it's just a single tear, and then it goes right back up because we don't want to show vulnerability.
Thank you much, young man. Thank you much. Well, question number one is, how does DAX employ vulnerability and emotional resilience in to be a man? Let's hear from the apostle at this time, Lucian Roas.
Yes, good night, everyone. It's such an honor to be on tonight again with this esteemed panel. It talks about exploring vulnerability, and he was really letting it out and saying we have our struggles, and he was pleading and begging for people to understand man. We are less emotional than women, so to speak. The Word of God talk about man as being the stronger vessel. We have more biceps and triceps. But in the beginning, God said it's not good for man to be alone. And even though we can show biceps and triceps and be tough on the outside, there's something called the inward man. And sometimes we are burning up and we are dying and crying on the inside. But we keep it, we bottle it up on the inside and we keep it in. And I personally myself has been through some stuff, and even as a leader, as a pastor, I find it sometimes difficult to be transparent to a point, because even in your transparency, you could be misunderstood. People can think that you're weak. People can think you're not spiritual, you're not deep. And so to avoid that, to look the part, you keep it up on the inside. And that can be dangerous when everything is on the inside. They are saying that pressure, it bursts pipes. It when there's pressure on the inside. And so we talk less. Girls will get together and they will talk and they'll cry and they'll scream and they'll let it out. And we hold it up on the inside and we grind it. And we seldom don't want to cry because we don't want to look weak. So he's saying, hey, man, we go through stuff too. and we want to be understood, and we want to be loved, and we want to be honored, and we want to be respected, and we want to be appreciated too. We got feelings too, even though we put up this facade that we are tough and we don't cry and we don't show emotion, but deep down on the inside, we want to be appreciated. It is says that isolation is one of the most deadliest thing one could experience, or even rejection. There were said people that is in solitary confinement. One guy, he gouged his eyes out. He bit his finger off. You put man by himself, you take away our freedom. And some people went into prison wrongly. And thank God for DNA. After 25 years, you hear the guy came out. And have to deal with that. You can't get those years back. So while we can endure tough things, we go through a lot. And that's why it's beautiful for us to understand our spouse, and even for our spouse to understand us. So he was crying out for understanding and attention, and at the same time saying we're resilient. We bring the bacon. We go to work and we face tough things. We face injustice. We face we harassed, and we all kind of stuff. And we come home and we bounce back, and we still hold the family together. So it's vulnerability and resiliency, and I applaud men. And we draw from our environment. We are conducive to our environment. A guy grew up in the ghetto, he will display ghetto tendencies. He grew up with a single father, a mother on drugs. He grew up in the projects. And while one might come out and be a doctor or lawyer, that's not normal, but more than likely we adapt to our environment. And sometimes the environment can be tough. And any way we can help, man, and any way we can contribute. So I appreciate what Drew is doing, what Lou is doing, reaching out to man. I am doing it in a different light. Everybody has their unique lane. I'm doing it in finance. Because guess what, man? Young brothers grow up and the pants sagging, and I'm not knocking them. They grow up in a low-income area, and no sense of understanding financial literacy. And what's the next move? They drop out of school. Hey, selling drugs seems to be easy. I could drive a fancy car. And they fall into that trap, not because they are wicked or evil. They succumb to the environment. And I want to be able to say, hey, man, you could be wealthy. You could find a path in terms of financial freedom and financial literacy. So in every way or shape, we could contribute in some way, shape, or form to help man in seeking his manhood.
Well said indeed. Well said, sir. You mentioned something about we burning and crying on the inside. This burning and crying on the inside, how would you say all of that manifests itself outwardly?
Well, sometimes, like we had a program last night? No, Tuesday night, and this young lady in my church, she has a master's in mental health and stuff like that, and she teaches at Rutgers University and so forth. And it was so awesome. It was so powerful. She came and she just spoke. And sometimes as men, she talked about what we do apart from being in church. And I said, I ride ATV. I go up into the mountains and through the ravines. And when I rev the throttle, the testosterone in me, kind of, and I feel like, I let out some of the rage, what I mean? That's why they see some of these guys on the football field, they become violent. They go out there and they grab the guy and they knock him to the floor. Yeah, we are men, we got testosterone. So when we keep it up on the inside, if we're not careful and we don't vent, we could vent it in the wrong way. To our wives, to our children, to our community. We could be angry, so it's good to talk. Talking is therapeutic. Mm-hmm. And so when men can come and talk without being judged, though. Because if I talk, you say, wow, apostle, come on, man, you're an apostle, man. You're not supposed to be going through this. I thought you were stronger and deeper than that. And so we need a place, man, where we could vent, where we could talk, where we could be vulnerable and transparent at the same time. So that inside is not going to keep it in. And it's always good to have a good friend or someone that you could share with. I think it's helpful.
Thank you very much, Apostle. Well said indeed. Okay, question number one. Let's put that to Drew. Drew, how say you?
Well, first, I do have to say I give Dax a ton of credit for being courageous. Now, music is a powerful vehicle to get a message across.
Yes.
So he used his artistic talents and that vehicle to share his truth. Now, what I find really powerful is that think about if Dax didn't use music and he told somebody in the social media these words. Do you think he'd get such a welcome by not using music? He told somebody. This society, I bet you there's a possibility he would have been shamed or canceled or all that stuff. You put something in music, I give him a ton of credit because he got the message across. And he has a variety of videos out there where he has other artists come in and tell their story. He takes that second stanza like he did with Darius Rucker in that video. Darius Rucker told his story of being a man. He has a great video of 10 minutes long of about 8 or 9 different artists sharing their version, where it's all relative what it is to be a man. Now, what is very powerful with the vulnerability is, and I like to tell stories with data. 85% of physical ailments are due to unaddressed internal stress. That's a fact. And men, due to fear of criticism, are told, don't be masculine because it's toxic. So we're being told, don't use your God-given talents, skills, whatever your DNA, don't use that because that's toxic. On the flip side, we're told, don't be emotional, don't cry, don't share, don't tell your story because that's a weakness. So if a man fears criticism and cares what other people think, then a man chooses to suppress emotional toxins that come out in tears and also natural toxins and emotional toxins that come out when you share your story, right? So we choose to suppress them. So if we're suppressing that stuff, we're keeping the toxins inside. It manifests physically through physical ailments. You see a lot of men dying of heart attacks in their 50s. And what you're also seeing is 49% of the population in the US are men, and we're 80% of the suicides. That's the isolation piece. Causes inaction and distress. So it's all out there that we're choosing to not be our true selves because we're listening and we're fear of criticism. We're accountable now, men, to let it out. And I'm not going to use it to heck with what people think of us when we do share, because that's a blessing. When we are our authentic selves and share our emotions and our truths,
yes.
If people don't like us, send them a thank you note. It's a great way to filter people who don't belong in our community by being ourselves. You don't like me for who I am? Goodbye. There's going to be a million people who are going to like me for who I am. It's time to stand up and be who you are and not care what other people think of you. And I give him so much credit because this is going to go so far. Because of men like us and Tatiana, a woman who supports men and we support women. We need to develop strong men. Strong men want to be with strong women. Strong women will raise strong children, strong families, and therefore you'll have a strong society, a strong country, a strong world. And we need this. And God bless Dax for having the courage to go out there. And God bless all the other artists who are joining in on this, because we can't hide ourselves anymore, you know? So thank you for allowing me to mention that.
Thank you, sir. You said something that's very important. You said that 80% of suicides are men. Why do you think so?
Men are taught to suppress. When you suppress, you isolate yourself. So I've created in my mind a formula that's not in numbers, it's in words. So when you're in isolation, you create inactivity. You're inactive. You don't do things to change your place. When you do that, that leads to despair. All right. And despair leads to giving up, which could be claiming your life. Right. The opposite of isolation is connection, connection with other human beings. When you connect, you act, you create action. When you create action, that breeds desire and faith. So I truly believe the men who are taking their lives live in isolation. And when you live in isolation, that leads to despair. There's no hope, right? You take away hope. Why are we here?
Where's gone?
You give somebody a desire to live, a great, bigger purpose, a higher purpose, and clarity of purpose in their life. They have faith that they can be something. They're not going to take their lives. And women are encouraged to share their emotions with other women. And I believe that men and women think differently. That's true. And if we know we think differently, we need to learn the thinking language of the other gender. Because if we understand how each gender thinks, we can communicate better and it enhances relationships, right? And until we break down the divide and get rid of labels and stop the divide that I think is being purposely created between men and women, between ethnicity, between black and white, they're trying to divide. They are trying to divide us so they can conquer us, right? We need unity. Get rid of the labels. Mandisa, you all know Mandisa, the Christian singer. She just passed away at age 47. Awful, but Mandisa wrote a song called We All Bleed the Same. Politically, left and right, we bleed the same. Black and white, we bleed the same. That's what we need is that unification, because unification will breed that connection, which then breeds action, which then breeds desire and faith. Stop the divide, get rid of the labels, and I think we're going to be okay. And it starts with this kind of discussion.
Thank you very much. Well said indeed, young man. Okay, question number one. Let's put that to Lowe's. Lowe's, how say you, sir?
Yeah, after last week, I had an opportunity, as I explained earlier, before the show started, to listen to the song, a number of times. And I think that was trying to express something that was never expressed in our past. When you talk historically in regards to manhood and fatherhood back in the day, is we were taught, look, hey, no, I think one of the most powerful questions that could be asked is, who taught you to be a man? Right. And so as I was sharing, when I grew up and being able to see my fathers, my uncles, my grandfathers, right, they were my examples. And so nobody was asking them how they felt. You feel good today? Nah, nobody was asking those questions, because their responsibility in terms of their role, not their purpose, in terms of their roles historically, was to be a provider, right? And whatever it would take to be that provider, right, they would do, working, providing. And then I think a lot of that is, I think Drew said it, when you talk about suppression. I believe that a lot of my grandfather, my father, my uncles were all functional alcoholics. Right? So they worked hard. And then as a Black man, you don't know what their experience was, how they were being spoken to during the course of the day, what they were experiencing physically, mentally. And so but they would go to work, they would provide, and then on Friday night they would drink. Right? And then they would drink Friday, Saturday, and then wake up on Sunday and go to church, sing in the choir, and do the same thing over the next week. And so when you hear Dax, it kind of affected me emotionally when you hear him say the things he was saying in there, right? I look back at my uncles and my father and my grandfather. Man, they weren't thinking that. They weren't thinking about being vulnerable. They weren't thinking about emotional resilience. They were just being what they consider as men. I'm just a man doing what I need to do to provide for my family, right? And so now him speaking out like this, me living in, at 60, in my 60s, now I'm saying, okay, wow, I didn't know back then I was supposed to express my feelings, right? So now if you're living in a generation now, if you talking about men now they get to do Dax and many others, we get to say it's okay to ask for somebody to ask how I'm feeling, right? It's okay today. So this is what I call a new man, right? We're trying to develop a new man, right? And hopefully there will be like I said last week, hopefully there will be a balance. When you talk about emotional, being vulnerable, right? Because ultimately you got to be a man, right? So you don't want to be on the other side where you just violence and you don't care about nobody. And you don't want to be on the other side where every moment I'm crying every minute, right? No, we need to find balance and I think that's what we need to be able to do.
I hear you. Okay, let me put this question to you, Lowe's, and also to the panel. Anyone that would like to weigh in before we should hear from Tatiana. Would you say that masculinity is a very intricate piece of tapestry?
I think it is. I mean, I think it's very important, right? But it depends on who's defining masculinity. Right. And then just for my statements earlier is that, if I'm going to rule over you, and if I think masculinity is I'm going to rule over you, I'm going to dominate over you, I'm going to dominate over women, I'm going to dominate my kids, right? And I'm going to use it to hurt people and to prove that I'm stronger and bigger. And, masculinity is toxic then. Right. But then you need to find the balance in that masculinity, right? So you can be, I had to find it in my marriage too, right? I had to know when to be able to say appreciation to my wife. I appreciate you, to say it to my kids, to say it to my son, because my father, I don't know any man who's ever said he loved me. Right. But with my sons all the time, and even my son-in-laws now, I have the ability to say, hey man, I love you. I can hug my sons as well as my daughters, but I can hug my sons, or I can hug a young man. I could say, I didn't know what that felt like to have somebody grab me and hug me. Say, man, I really love you, man. Right. So I think that, my son-in-laws, my sons growing up in this era, they will see a different kind of man, but a balance.
Anyone else like to weigh in on that question before we should go to Tatiana? Okay, if not,
I like the word, Bishop Scott. I like what Lowe's said about balance. Today, when we say balance, or we use the word holistic, sometimes people look at it as not spiritual, that is more or less carnal or secular. But one of the things the scripture said, that the sons of Issachar, they understood the times. They understood their time. What was the order of the day? What was the culture of the day? What was okay? What was normal? What was cultural? And so they understood the time. So what worked for my father and grandfather back in the 60s and 70s, I never heard my father told my mother he loved her. And I really think he did, but he never verbally expressed it. But now it's different. So as Luz was saying, to hug a man and say, man, I love you, brother. this is the time because now we evolve, and some people don't like to hear the word either. Evolve, think is too secular. And we understand the times. This times we have information, we have data, we have science, we have more understanding. At least the scripture said in the last days, knowledge shall increase. And information is one of the most powerful commodity on planet Earth. So the times of the 80s, we survived that time doing certain things. And we are living in a different time now. And one can be more transparent, one can be more open. There's more resources available for help, for therapy, for counseling. So this time is a bit different from, I would say, the 80s. So let's embrace it. Yeah.
Let's embrace it. Anyone else like to weigh in? Okay, well, if not, let's hear now from Tatiana. And we are so happy to have you on, young lady. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop. Well, I would like to weigh in a little bit on that. You know, I find it interesting because my dad, who has passed away in the last 2 years, he was raised by his sisters. He lost his parents very early on. So he was raised by all his older sisters and brothers, and he heard the I love yous. Interesting enough, my father did go to the military early on also, but as he became a husband and wife, I mean, I remember as his child hearing him tell us how he loved us and tell my mother that he loved her very much. My mother was very involved with the church, and he used to sometimes get upset because she would be out of the house many nights a week to do activities. And my father would say, I cannot compete with Jesus Christ, you know, like I have to deal with her being out. But hearing all of you and understanding, you know, the role of a man, especially back then, and how it influences the next generation. I'm so fortunate that my dad was very active in all of our lives and his grandchildren, and he has many grandsons, and he would hug them and tell them he loved them, and they vice versa grew up saying it back to him and to their fathers. So he set that example for them that still carries on today, which as a single parent, as I mentioned before, to me, that is so valuable to, you know, have. But anyway, that was me adding on to that piece.
Beautiful.
As to the song, I agree with Drew. I think that Docs used his platform courageously in expressing his vulnerability, right? And how he stated having a lonely road, no one understanding him, can't show his emotions, can't cry. You know, he was very specific and clear on that vulnerability piece, which is crucial because you see it in men of all ages, you know. It's almost like a stigma. You can't cry. You can't tell anyone how you're really feeling because then their manhood is being challenged, right? On many different platforms, right? By peers, by men, by other men. Men are sometimes their own worst enemy within the gender, right? So I saw that. As emotional resilience, though, I wanted to just go over how I was defining it as the means of bouncing back from a stressful encounter and not letting it affect our internal motivation, right? In his song, you see how he's talking about how a lot of men are broken, right? They turn to alcohol, they serve in the military. I feel like for men, it's accepting that they're broken. Again, it goes to expressing what they're feeling though, right? And being able to continue to grow with the broken pieces, right? Because that's what resiliency is. is knowing that you went through all of this and this is who you are, but you're still thriving, you're still moving forward. You're looking at the glass half full, not half empty. Like Drew said, there is an 80% rate of suicide within the male population, a lot because of depression, right? Men are suppressing all these emotions. It turns into depression. They don't know how to handle it. They don't cope well. And then they take out, they commit suicide. So it's a really big need to address this topic, but this is how I feel like Docs was expressing it in his.
Well said, young lady. You mentioned the word resilience. Okay, now, would you say that we need more of that? And how do you build resilience?
Right. So resilience is, first of all, knowing, right? Your own story, your narrative, right? Everyone has a different story. Everybody, in this sense, men, what are the challenges that they're living through? What have they gone through? And being able to say, okay, this is who I am. This is what I've been through. Taking all that and being able to accept that they're not perfect, right? I think because of the manhood perspective, men feel like they need to be this, this courageous hero in the eyes of everyone, their families, society, their peers. I mean, but they're fallible, they're humans. We do know how to communicate and express ourselves. We teach our young ladies to be able to cry and say what hurts and what's bothering them. But men, I mean, nowadays we have bullying. Starts at a very young age, and if they don't know how to express this, it just like ferments, right? It carries on, it carries on, it carries on. Now you're broken. Now you're a full-grown adult man. You're totally broken by all these events that have traumatized you along the way. You have to be able to identify that, accept it, collect it, and move forward to be resilient. But if you can't address it, how do you move forward from it?
Okay, thank you much, young lady. Thank you much. Let me put this question to the men. Men, how do you, as an individual man, build resilience?
Well, one of the things I was just thinking about this, about, whether I was ever emotional and had to, to build up to be stronger, growing up in a single parent home and, being trying to play sports, right? Something inside of me, I never wanted to lose, right? And if I lost a game, man, I'd cry after every game. I mean, literally. I mean, I don't care who was there. I mean, we didn't win. I didn't do well. I mean, so I was used to just crying, and I remember I didn't lose much after that, but between, middle school and high school, and then I finally, I received a scholarship to play basketball in college. And we lost the first game. So the coach was like, I was in my locker. I was, I'm a grown man now. I'm in my locker and I'm just crying, right? So the coach comes over, he taps me on the shoulder. He said, man, you ain't got enough tears. I don't know how many games we're going to win this year, right? So it made me think about that, right? Like, hey, I can't just be crying all the time. Right. Somewhere along the line, either I got to win more, I got to suck it up or whatever, but I just can't be crying all the time. So, in building resiliency, I mean, it's important because you go through so much, particularly as a young man. I had to learn. Here's one thing that happened for me. I was like 10 or 11 years old. I'm standing in front of my building. I see my mom, right? And I know that she had been experiencing with my dad this whole domestic violence experienced. So I'm standing in front of the building, and my mom says to me, "Hey, I want your dad and I are no longer going to be together. We're going to be separated. I don't know how often you're going to see him." And she says to me, being the oldest out of the family, she said to me, "You're now going to be the man of the house." And I was thinking in my head at 10, 11 years old, I don't even know what that means. But my mother said something very simple. She said, "Look, whatever your brothers and your sisters see you do, they will do it. So be careful. Choose what you do because it's important. Choose what you say, choose what you do, choose how you act," right? And to me, she defined for me what manhood was to be responsible. Now, I didn't know at 11 was that, but then I every day I would take notice of where I would go with my brothers and sisters, what I would say when I was around them. And even to the day, my brothers and sisters will tell me that I was an amazing example for them. Because if I went to the game or hung out in the street and started drinking, I'm sure 100% they would have followed me, because they thought they wanted to be like me. So they did everything I did, right? And they all became, successful in their own way. So when I talk about resilience, my mother made that statement to me, and I think she just sewed into me something that was very powerful.
Anyone else, please?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to expound on what Mr. Moore had spoken about as far as giving the lessons and everything. So my son, when he was in high school and junior high, even elementary school, his mom, his aunt, his grandmother, they would always baby him. And I had to let them know, listen, you're not raising a girl child, you're raising a boy child, you're raising a man. Men are supposed to be independent. They're not supposed to be dependent. You don't want a man being raised who is going to have to rely on you or someone else for everything in life. You have to let him grow and let him learn to fend for himself. And I remember he was in high school, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but I do remember the conversation. And I had to explain to him that once you leave these doors, no one cares. The only people that care about you are me, your mom, your grandmother, your aunt, your immediate family. Other than that, no one cares. And when he got to college, he called me one night. He's like, "Dad, I didn't believe you when I was in high school, but nobody cares. If I don't go to class, if I do go to class, nobody cares. If I eat tonight or if I don't eat, nobody cares." Like, dude, so in teaching people to be a man, that's one of the things that we have to learn to deal with. Like they say, God only looks out for fools and babies, right? It doesn't look out for adults. Men are taught to fend for themselves, and we have to teach that to our young men from the beginning, to be independent rather than dependent. And that's part of the resilience that we have to build up in our young men.
Beautiful. Okay, let me ask you this simple question. We only have 7 minutes left. Time seems to just disappear.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hurt the feeling of anyone tonight, but the question is this: do women use a man's vulnerability against him? Do women use a man's vulnerability against him? Okay, Drew, how say you?
All right. I don't generalize, but I am going to say that women test men. And here's what I mean by that. And this is I do a lot of interviewing of both men and women, and men cannot read women's minds.
Thank God. Thank God.
Many women would like to think that men can. So if a woman gets upset with a man because he didn't walk her to her car, if he's asked directly, for my safety, can you walk me to my car? Let's say you're on a date, man's going to do it. Sometimes you have to tell men right here, right straight, tell them exactly what you want. So if you ask them and tell them why, man, they're going to do it. But if you expect them to be able to read your mind, it's not going to happen. That's why the communication, I believe they do test, and maybe it's not malicious, and maybe it's unconscious or subconscious. But if you want to test a man, ask them. If they don't do it, they didn't pass the test. But if you ask them and they do it for you because they care about you and respect you, oh yeah, they'll do it. So I think they test. I don't think they take advantage of the vulnerability. I think it's testing.
Seeing that we only have 5 minutes left, let's hear from Tatiana concerning that question. The question is, do women use a man's vulnerability against him?
Well, I'm going to say this. I was raised by a dad who loved his girls. And I'll tell you, when I started dating, my father would not allow me to answer to a horn of any kind. If the guy wanted to take me out, he needed to get out of his car and ring the bell and come in the house and introduce himself. So I think that I'm going to respond in this way. I think it's how we are raised, both men and women. I think the piece here is communication, which is totally not 100%, right? We're exploring how communication needs to come out more from men. Men lack in this area. So I do believe, though, that there are men that are raised by amazing parents that are taught values and communication and how to treat a woman. I always say, for instance, to my sons, don't do to a woman what you would never want another man to do to your sister, right? Or to your mother, for that matter, right? So I live by, that kind of example when it comes to my sons, but there are women that would test some men, I'm sure. I mean, I have a few people that I have also spoken to, and you hear some of the tests in domestic violence. You see it a lot, right? A lot of women. There are a lot of men who are victims of domestic violence. But again, the stigma of not coming out and telling people, oh, my other half, who's a woman, just finished beating me. They're not going to say it, right? You're not going to hear it. They rather say they got into a bar fight with another man than say, oh, my wife or my girlfriend beat me. So I do think that some women may be testing, but I think they also test because that's the only way they'll know where, their partner is emotionally at, if it makes sense, right? Not to justify their means and how they go about it. But I think in today's society, there's no reason for that, on both ends, right? If women are expecting a certain behavior from a man, they can actually say that in the initial stages of dating, such as men also, right? Vice versa. Men can also express what they're looking for in a woman. So.
Thank you much. We just have 3 minutes left. Rashawn, I'll give you 90 seconds to respond to that question. You're muted.
Now I'm down to 85 seconds. The test usually comes out when there's a conflict in between the in between the sexes. A lot of times because a woman will tend to find something that the man holds dear and then use that to try to leverage the situation or to get things to bend into her way. But men do the exact same thing, but it's typically not something that I've never encountered something like that when there wasn't a conflict. That's the only time that I can really say that.
Thank you, sir.
Something like that.
Apostle, you have 30 seconds, sir.
Woo. Hey, the part that I just want to touch on in 30 seconds is that we can't cry when life gets hard. Unconditional love for women, children, and dogs. We know that we just have to play our part, and nobody give a damn about our broken heart. And Tatiana, you said something about women beating men or physical abuse, but it hurts like crazy when a woman takes them out and put down her husband or man after having a hard day's work outside. And I'm saying vice versa is wrong, but I'm saying when we come home and a woman use her tongue, which is powerful, to tell us that we know good, it really, really crushes our manhood. And if a woman, and I love women, don't get me wrong, it's an attack on them, my mother, my wife, my daughters, but speaking to a man without respecting him, it's such a painful psychological thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you much. Okay, Lowe's, you have 30 seconds, sir.
Yeah, I'm going to use 15 seconds to say real quickly as a former professional athlete. I mean, you know, in that field of entertainment or even in business or something like that, man, women can, men could be very vulnerable. I mean, I've seen women take advantage of men because some men just come out, they just like nice guys, and all of a sudden, you know, next thing you know, they having a baby, and the next thing you know, you're getting rid of the guy, and you're in a divorce, and you're there just for the money. So I'm saying there are some women out there that do those things. Hey, I'll say this in a positive way, right? My wife and my daughters take advantage of me all the time. I mean, all the time.
Love you, Drew. Love you, man. Listen, we've heard a lot. We've said a lot.
You lying.
Yeah, they can get
That's funny.
My daughters know how to get in my pocket all the time. They can get
Listen,
I
in 10 seconds, we've heard a lot, we've said a lot. What can we take away from tonight's conversation? Drew, what can we take away from tonight's conversation?
These conversations need to continue. The more we have these types of dialogues, the more comfortable people will be in discussing it. And it's important to come out of your comfort zone and feel comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's when a lot of the growth happens.
Thank you much. Okay, Rashawn, what can we take away from tonight's conversation?
These conversations are our therapy. You know, these are therapeutic for everyone who's involved. And if we can have a lot more of these conversations with our friends and also with our families, then that'll do a lot to move everyone forward emotionally and mentally. Thank you much. Apostle?
One of the things I love what Drew said was how we can take art and really drive a point home in terms of leverage, in terms of the message. And that was powerful in terms of platform and influence, putting that message in a song.
Beautiful. And Lois?
My wife came and interrupted me, so I don't know what what the question was. But no, I mean, this is great in terms of the more we hear these things, the more people hear you share, the more we talk about it. You know, that's how we change the dynamics.
Beautiful. And last but not least, Tatiana.
Validating the challenges that men go through and breaking away from the stigma that they've had to endure all this for years, generations, right? So I think it's very powerful, and the conversation needs to continue. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay, this is Bishop Scott saying thank you for weighing in tonight on the Bishop's Corner. And let us all remember that a man is an intricate piece of tapestry. God bless you much. Back to you, Dr. Phil.
Thank you so much, Bishop Scott. That was an amazing discussion, guys. Don't forget to catch us next week again, same time, same channel. See you again next time, everyone. Take care.